Hi, Phyllis here from southernfrugal.com. This afternoon we're going to make a small carrot cake. Now, if you double this recipe, you could make it in a tube pan and make a much bigger cake, or you could make it in 3 layers, but you'd have to double the recipe. So I'm just making a small one for us. So I wanted to share with you when I first had carrot cake. I was babysitting for a lady. A friend of mine used to babysit for her, but my friend, who happened to have been born on the exact same day I was born, so we were exactly the same age, her parents let her date. My parents did not let me date. So she turned over her babysitting to me. And the lady that I babysit for, she was very fashionable. She was blonde and very pretty, slim, and she always wore the latest fashion, high heels, those big earrings, and her hair was always done, her fingernails were always painted. She was just real attractive and super, super nice. So she had 3 little boys. I think they were 5, 4, and 3. I know, they were. And the little boys were not hard to handle at all. They were very nice, and usually they went out, this couple went out on Saturday night, and so I would babysit. And I always felt bad about that because all my friends were dating, but I wasn't allowed. And so anyway, I made myself okay with that. So anyway, I babysat for them on Saturday night, and they usually went out. I think they went out dancing because they were always dressed up, and the gentleman always had on a suit and a tie. So I don't know where they went, but anyway, so I kind of made my spending money that way, and money for clothes sometimes. Of course, clothes weren't expensive back then. But anyway, so I was babysitting for her on the Friday after Thanksgiving. And so I came in, and she used to always come and pick me up and then bring me back home. Of course, my parents had to know who she was and who the family, you know, all the whole 9 yards before I could start babysitting for them. So she would always come and pick me up, and so this was the Friday after Thanksgiving, which we now know as Black Friday, but back then it was just a big shopping day. That's all we knew. And so anyway, she said, well, there's some carrot cake in here if you'd like some. Her little boys didn't particularly eat it, so she said if you would like some of it. And so she had it it was a pound cake, you know, cooked in a tube pan. And so when she said it was carrot cake, I thought, I don't think I want any of that. I didn't tell her that, but that's what I thought. But anyway, so her and her friend were shopping for hour after hour. I bet I babysat that day probably 5 or 6 hours. And so I finally got hungry. Now, she always fixed it so I could make the boys sandwiches for lunch or whatever. And I had already done that. In fact, the younger boy was taking a nap. So in desperation and being very hungry, I decided I would cut me a piece of the cake. And to my surprise, I loved it. I mean, I loved it. So I had that piece, and so a few minutes later I said, well, I'm going to get another little piece. So I ate another little piece, and then I said, well, I think I want another piece. So it was kind of embarrassed when she got back because I had eaten about that much out of that cake. It was a lot. And ever since then, I had tried to find a cake that was like that cake. It did not have all of that cream cheese and all that ice, and it didn't have any pineapple in it. And you could not tell they were carrots. It really tastes like a super moist spice cake to me. That's what it tastes. It was just delicious. So anyway, over the years, I kind of came up with my own version of that. It's not a super sweet carrot cake, and it doesn't have all that icing on it. It's just a plain cake, but I think it's quite good. So anyway, now, the other thing I wanted to mention about the carrots, this is the shredding side, no, excuse me, this is the shredding side of this. Slicing side. Another side that's like a planer, and then there's this side. Can you all see that? Okay, the first time I made a carrot cake, of course you had to shred it, not shred it. I'm confused. I need to start over. This is grating it. This is shredding it. Now, most of the carrot cakes you get now, you can actually see little pieces of carrot in them. Now what that does is it makes it not as moist as it would be if you grate them on this side. Now, the first one I made, I was grating for hours, y'all, hours to come up with 3 cups of carrots, because that's what the big full recipe called for. So anyway, I didn't make it that often. But then, after food processors, y'all, life became much easier. So what I do to get it, you almost want the carrots pureed. So in the food processor, I use the shredder attachment right here, and I leave my blades in, which purees it really. And it'll make the cake much, much more moist. So I'm going to go ahead and puree these carrots. I think I've got about 6 of them here. And what I'm looking for is a 1.5 cups for this recipe, so we'll be right back. All right, we have gotten our carrots grated. I want you to see how finely they're grated up. And it's easy to do in the food processor. Just put the shredder blade on top and then let the other blades stay in there and just keep grinding them up. So that took about 6 medium to somewhat large carrots. All right, so we're ready to start mixing this up now. All right, so we're going to start out with a cup of sugar. So that's 1 cup of sugar, 1/3 of a cup of oil. Now you can use, any kind of light oil you want, or if you want to use butter, I would use a whole stick of butter, which would equal 1/2 cup. So I'm going to dump the oil in. And I'm using 2 large eggs. Now these are extra large Eggland Best eggs, so probably if you're using like medium eggs, you'd want to use 3 of them. But I'm using 2. And I'm going to just mix that up a little bit. And I'm just using my hand mixer for this because it doesn't take long to mix it up at all. So I'm using 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I'm going to go ahead and put 1 teaspoon of cinnamon in. That's all, just 1 teaspoon. And we're going to use 1 teaspoon of pure vanilla extract. Go ahead and put that in. Whoop. A little more never hurt. Alright, so I'm going to mix that up with the spatula first so that cinnamon doesn't fog out everywhere. Alright, so we're going to mix this up with the mixer and we'll be right back. No? Okay. Alright, we got that mixed up and we just ran the mixer in it for less than a minute really. I'm going to go ahead and dump the carrots in now. And these are grated carrots, not shredded. Just going to turn the mixer on for just another second or 2. Set this mixer aside. We're going to add the flour. Now on the flour I'm using White Lily all-purpose flour, and I'm also using 1 teaspoon of baking powder. So 1 1/3 cups of sifted all-purpose flour. Now you want to sift it first and then measure out 1 1/3 cups. So we're just going to put this in with the baking soda right on top there. And I'm just going to use a spoon to kind of mix that up a little bit, not much. Alright, so now we're ready to dump this flour in. We'll dump about half of it in and get it kind of mixed in. And you want to grease and flour a tube pan. Now mine is 9 by 5 by I think 2 3/4, and this is a Pyrex glass pan. 9 by 5. And And so we're going to bake this at 325 degrees for probably about an hour. Now I'm not going to put the mixer back in it until the very end here. So I'm just going to mix it around. Get that flour incorporated. Because once you add the flour, you don't want to do a whole lot of mixing then, because that will make your cake tough. And by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, what will make the carrot cake much more moist if you grate the carrots instead of shredding them. It'll be the same amount of carrots, but it's just much more moist when they're grated. And if you've got a food processor, of course, that would be very easy. Yeah, the food processors definitely made our life easier, for sure. All right, we're going to mix this up just a teeny bit. And that's all we need. Now your batter is going to be runnier than like a cake mix cake, or even like a pound cake. But that's because of the carrots in there. All right, so we're ready to dump this in the loaf pan now. So you bake it at 325 for about an hour, and before you take it out, you want to check it with a toothpick. Just insert the toothpick down in the middle of it and see if it comes out clean. If it doesn't, you'll need to bake it just a little bit longer. It turns out a very liquidy type batter, but in the end it'll be a cake, y'all. All right, there's what it looks like. We're going to put it in the oven. We'll be back in about an hour when this is done. All right, here's a copy of the recipe. I just call this small carrot cake, and this is my version. If y'all can see that, that's 1 cup of sugar, 2 eggs, and I used extra large Eggland Best, 1/3 cup oil, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1 teaspoon cinnamon, 1 teaspoon vanilla, and 1½ cups of finely grated or pureed carrots, and it's best to use a food processor for that. And then you want 1 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour, and you sift it first and then measure it, because if you don't sift it, you'll end up with a lot more flour than 1 1/3 cups. And 1 teaspoon of baking powder. So you want to grease and flour 1 9 by 5 inch and preferably 2 3/4 inches high glass Pyrex loaf pan, or you could use a metal pan. You want to bake it at 325 degrees for approximately 1 hour or until it's done. And the way you find out if it's done is just stick a toothpick down in the middle of it. If it comes out clean, it's done. All right, again, there's the recipe. I hope y'all can read that. All right, when this cake gets done, we'll be back. All right, we just took the cake out of the oven, and I'm going to make some kind of sauce to go over it. Oops, there go my dogs. Maybe a little lemony sauce. All right, we'll be back. It's got to cool. All right, we're going to make a little sauce or glaze to go on our little carrot cake. That's about 2 tablespoons of melted butter. And to that, I'm going to add the juice of a lemon. All right, that's probably a good 2 tablespoons of lemon juice. And to that, I'm going to add a cup or so of confectionery sugar. Just going to dump it in. Now, this is just a little glaze to go on the cake. So that was probably a cup of confectionery sugar. Stir that up a little bit. It's too thick. We're going to add just a little bit of milk. Just to get it to a more spreading consistency. That ought to do it, about a tablespoon or so. because I want it a little runny. And that lemon will kind of cause that milk to get thick and kind of clabber is what it does. Alright, I'm going to use my little whisk, get out any little lumps. Really quick, a little lump won't hurt anything though. Alright, I'm going to show y'all how I do this. Now remember, we're just eating this cake at home. It's not like it's for cooking or anything. Now it's still a little warm. I'm leaving it in the pan, and forgive my dogs, they like to bark. I'm just going to dump it right on top and let some run down the side and let it soak all in. And I'm going to push it right over the side so it'll run down and soak up. Sorry about that, the dogs just bark and bark. Now what we do is just cut this while it's still in the pan, really. So we'll take a knife and run right down the side so more of that can run down. Now the cake is still warm. Turn it around. Let it run down there. That side too. Yeah, I like my cakes very moist. And this one will be, I can tell you. Alright, not very pretty, but it's sure going to taste good, y'all. Alright, we're going to let this finish cooling. Let me show you a close-up of it. There. We're going to let it finish cooling, and we'll be back, and we'll cut some of it. Alright, we'll be back.